Donald Trump sold strength the way he sold everything else in his life, as a vibe, a posture, a brand you can slap on top of whatever chaos you're actually causing. And now that the chaos has a name, Operation Epic Fury, and American families are learning the names of the dead, the whole MAGA fantasy is collapsing in real time. The same president who launched a war without congressional authorization is suddenly, reportedly, scrambling for a ceasefire he assumed would arrive on cue the moment he declared victory. When Iran rejects that offer and signals it will dictate terms, what's exposed isn't just a tactical misread, it's the core fraud of Trumpism. It confuses theatrical violence with strategy and then acts shocked when the world doesn't play along with the script. Let's ground this in what's publicly verifiable, because that's where the stakes demand we live. U.S. Central Command has announced that it commenced Operation Epic Fury on the 28th of February, 2026, at the direction of the president. In the first wave of consequences that can't be spun away, CENTCOM has also confirmed 3 U.S. service members killed and 5 seriously wounded in the operation, the first publicly reported American casualties of this conflict. Meanwhile, the economic shock is already rippling across the globe's most sensitive maritime choke point. Reuters reports that at least 150 crude and LNG tankers dropped anchor beyond the Strait of Hormuz, with congestion and immobilized vessels on both sides after U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. As shipping risk spikes and insurers recalibrate the price of war, now place those facts next to the posture Trump and MAGA Republicans are trying to sell the country. The transcript you provided describes a White House that only prepared for a 4 to 5 day war, assumed killing Iran's top leader would produce instant capitulation, and is now begging Iran for a ceasefire while Iran rejects it and signals any ceasefire will be on its terms. Whether you treat every claim in that commentary as fully confirmed or not, the structure of the story matches what we already know about Trump's governing instincts. He makes maximalist moves, ignores warnings, bets the country on his personal gut, and then tries to blame everyone else when reality refuses to cooperate. That isn't peace through strength. It's a air with American lives as the chips. What makes this moment politically poisonous for Republicans is that the scam is visible from multiple angles at once. First, there is the constitutional scandal. War is not supposed to be a private presidential hobby. The Constitution vests Congress with the power to declare war for a reason, because the decision to plunge Americans into armed conflict is the most serious public act a democracy can take, and it should not hinge on one man's impatience, ego, or electoral calculus. Yet major reporting and international analysis describe Trump bypassing Congress as he launched Epic Fury and drifted into open-ended regime change rhetoric without specifying an imminent threat in a manner that meets the gravity, the act. The right-wing line is that process is optional because terrorism is scary and because Trump made an 8-minute video, as if a social media address is a substitute for democratic authorization. That's not patriotism. That's submission to personal rule. Second, there is the strategic incoherence. Even if you believe Iran is a malign actor, and it is in many respects, the question is not whether Tehran is virtuous. The question is whether the United States is led by adults who understand the day after. Regime change is not a plan, it's a slogan that reliably produces vacuums, fragmentation, and wider war. The transcript captures the MAGA impulse perfectly. Kill the captain, declare the mothership is sinking, and treat the rest as someone else's problem. That is the same fantasy that haunted America through Iraq. The belief that toppling a figure equals stabilizing a nation. Countries are not reality shows. They don't wrap neatly at the end of a news cycle because the star says the word victory. Third, there is the moral obscenity of how casually this movement treats U.S. casualties, once they are no longer theoretical. 3 Americans killed, 5 seriously wounded, and the public is asked to accept this as the cost of Trump's impulse, justified after the fact with chest thumping. And the transcript captures the chilling disconnect. The body count starts, and Trump's rhetorical world remains stuck in con artist language success. Nobody can believe it. Blame shifting about Iran, playing it too cute, like the deaths are just unfortunate weather interfering with a branding launch. When a president talks that way, it isn't just tasteless. It's evidence that the human cost is not the center of his decision-making. The center is his ego and the performance of dominance. And fourth, there's the economic hostage-taking. The Strait of Hormuz isn't an abstract geography lesson. It's the artery through which an enormous share of global oil and LNG flows. Reuters shipping data showing tankers anchoring, traffic freezing, and risk climbing is what shock looks like in the real economy. If this conflict expands or sustains, ordinary Americans will pay at the pump, in grocery aisles, and through inflatables out from energy prices into everything else. That matters because Trump's political rise was fueled by a promise, false but potent, that he would make life cheaper and easier for working people by sheer force of will. Instead, he's lighting a match near the most combustible economic choke point on earth and acting like the fallout is someone else's fault. So when Iran rejects a ceasefire offer, or when credible reporting indicates Tehran is not inclined to stop on Washington's preferred timeline, the correct question isn't, why won't Iran behave? The correct question is, why did the United States put itself in a position where it expected an adversary to behave like a supporting character in Trump's ego story? If the president's internal model of the world is that other states will comply once he makes a dramatic move, then the nation is being governed by a man who has never outgrown the boardroom bluff. The problem is that diplomacy and war are not real estate negotiations. In Manhattan, if you misread the room, you lose money. In the Persian Gulf, if you misread the room, you lose lives and you can lose control of escalation. This is where the Republican Party's role becomes the indictment. In a functioning system, a president who bypasses Congress to launch a major military operation would face immediate bipartisan insistence on authorization, oversight, and a defined mission. Instead, key GOP figures have trained themselves to treat any demand for accountability as disloyalty. The grotesque soundbite mentality of it, senators and representatives who wave away the need for a plan, who treat the question, are we at war, as a semantic nuisance, who act like no boots on the ground, is a magic spell that guarantees there will be no American blood. That is not leadership, it's complicity. It is the deliberate hollowing out of democratic checks so that Trump can rule by impulse and dare the country to stop him. And this is the part Democrats should say without flinching. This war posture is not just reckless, it's illegal in the most basic democratic sense if it lacks authorization. And it is being defended by people who have spent years lecturing America about constitutionalism while they shred it the moment it inconveniences their leader. That hypocrisy is not a side issue. It is the engine of MAGA governance. The movement does not believe in rules, it believes in rulers. It does not honor institutions, it uses them. It does not respect the Constitution. It recites it when it is useful and discards it when it restrains Trump. C matters because it reveals that even Trump's own team understands the gap between the story they sell and the reality they created. If you truly believed you had a coherent, lawful, sustainable strategy, you wouldn't be improvising a premature off-ramp the moment your fantasy timeline breaks. You wouldn't be discovering after missiles fly and coffins return that munitions, stockpiles, and sustainment matter, that allies matter, that escalation ladders matter, that the world economy reacts to risk before politicians craft talking points. The transcripts focus on whether the U.S. can sustain a longer conflict, and on fears of running out of munitions points to a deeper scandal, a presidency that appears to have treated war planning like a short-term stunt rather than a solemn national commitment. At the same time, Democrats should also resist the trap Trump always sets, the trap where outrage substitutes for clarity. The point is not to mirror MAGA's appetite for absolutist emotionalism. The point is to insist on a standard that protects the country. If the United States uses force, it must be lawful, necessary, targeted, and tied to a realistic end state. It must be debated, authorized, and overseen. It must be communicated honestly to the public, and it must never be inflated into regime change fantasies that treat millions of human beings like background scenery for an American leader's performance of power. What we're watching is a collision between two realities. One reality is the real world. Missiles, drones, retaliation, shipping disruptions, tankers anchoring, served families receiving calls that no politician should treat as an afterthought. The other reality is the MAGA story world, a place where Trump can launch a 4 to 5 day war, declare unbelievable success, and expect the universe to deliver him a neat win on his schedule. When those realities diverge, Trump does what he always does. He tries to rewrite the narrative, shift blame, demand loyalty, and bully the country into accepting the consequences as proof of his greatness rather than evidence of his recklessness. Iran rejecting a ceasefire offer is not, by itself, the most important part of this crisis. The most important part is that Trump believed the ceasefire was his to summon because he believed the war itself was his to stage. That is what makes this presidency so dangerous. A Democratic leader treats war as a last resort and a shared responsibility. Trump treats it like a personal instrument. And a party that once pretended to believe in constitutional limits is now trying to normalize that personal instrument as if it were the natural right of a strong man. There is only one way to break that cycle: drag the decision back into the sunlight, force the vote, force the oversight, force the legal rationale onto the record with real definitions of imminence and objective and end state, not vibes and slogans. And above all, refuse the propaganda that says accountability is betrayal, accountability is patriotism. It is the minimum that a democracy owes its service members, because if a nation is going to ask people to risk dying, it owes them something more than a leader's impulsive gamble and a party's obedient applause. Trump isn't panicking because he suddenly found religion about peace. He's panicking because the performance is failing. The war isn't staying small. The economic shock is immediate. The casualties are real. And the adversary isn't giving him the tidy ending he wanted. And in that panic is the clearest warning America can receive. This is what happens when you let a con artist cosplay as commander-in-chief. The world doesn't bend to his ego. It bends Americans into the shape of his mistakes.